Have you ever noticed that there is something deeply wrong happening around us? I'm not talking about wars, economic crises, or climate change. I'm talking about something more subtle, more pervasive, something that's happening inside ourselves and in the people we love. It's that feeling that despite being more connected than ever, more informed than any previous generation, freer to choose our paths, something essential is slowly draining from our lives. It's as if we're watching our own society die from within, cell by cell, relationship by relationship, dream by dream. Perhaps you felt this the last time you went out with friends and everyone was looking at their screens instead of looking at each other. Maybe you noticed it in your own home when you realized you haven't had a real conversation with the people you live with for months. Or perhaps it was in that moment when you realized you no longer know what you really want from life, because all options seem equally empty. This feeling isn't paranoia. It's not excessive pessimism. It's the symptom of a historical transformation happening right before our eyes. And today, we're going to explore not just what's causing this inner death of our society, but also what we can do to reverse this process before it's too late. To understand what's happening to us now, we first need to look back and understand how we got here. For most of human history, people lived in small, dense communities where each individual had a clear and defined role. The blacksmith knew he was the blacksmith. The baker knew he was the baker. The mother knew she was the mother. These roles weren't just professions or functions. They were complete identities that gave meaning and purpose to existence. More importantly, these identities were recognized and validated by the community every day. When the blacksmith forged a tool, the entire village knew the value of that work. When the mother raised her children, the entire community participated and recognized the importance of that function. It was a system of constant meaning, where every action had immediate purpose and social recognition. People didn't wonder what they were for, because their usefulness was obvious and constantly reaffirmed by others around them. This meaning system worked for thousands of years, creating cohesive societies where, despite all material hardships, people had clarity about their place in the world. Of course, there were enormous limitations. Choices were few, social mobility almost non-existent, and often the roles were oppressive. But there was something we've lost. A clear sense of purpose and belonging that was automatically provided by the social structure. The Great Rupture began with the Industrial Revolution, but accelerated dramatically in recent decades with what we can call the infinite choice revolution. Suddenly, in the last 50 years, we became the first generation in human history with access to practically unlimited options in almost every aspect of life. We can choose our profession from thousands of possibilities. We can choose where to live from practically anywhere on the planet. We can choose our partners through apps that connect us to millions of people. We can choose our beliefs, our values, our appearance, our lifestyle, our sexual identity, our diet, our entertainment, our sources of information. Theoretically, this should be the golden age of human fulfillment. With so many options, everyone should find exactly what makes them happy and fulfilled. But exactly the opposite happened. Instead of becoming happier and more fulfilled, we became progressively more anxious, depressed, and mainly confused about who we really are and what we really want. What psychologists call the paradox of choice revealed a disturbing truth about human nature. We weren't evolutionarily programmed to deal with infinite choices. Our brain, which evolved to make quick decisions in small groups with limited options, simply cannot adequately process the overload of possibilities that characterizes modern life. But the issue goes far beyond the difficulty of choosing. The fundamental problem is that when everything is a choice, nothing seems to have inherent meaning. If I can choose any profession, then no profession seems especially important. If I can choose any value system, then no value system seems especially true. If I can choose any lifestyle, then no lifestyle seems especially right for me. This is the hidden tragedy of modern freedom. By giving us the ability to choose everything, it inadvertently removed the meaning from everything. When something is imposed by tradition, necessity, or circumstances, it carries the weight of inevitability and therefore seems meaningful. But when something is merely a choice among millions of other equally valid choices, it loses this ontological weight. That's why so many people today feel they're living lives that are simultaneously privileged and empty. We have more freedom than any previous generation, but this freedom came accompanied by a crisis of meaning that is silently corroding our collective mental health. Digital technology multiplied this problem exponentially by creating what we can call perpetual comparison society through social media. Each individual now has constant access to the carefully curated lives of millions of other people. This means that whatever choice you make about your life, you're constantly exposed to evidence that millions of other people made different choices that seem more interesting, more successful, happier, or more authentic than yours. If you choose to marry young, you see people who chose to travel the world alone, having incredible adventures. If you choose to focus on your career, you see people who chose to have children experiencing deep and meaningful love. If you choose to live in the city, you see people who chose to live in the countryside, enjoying peace and connection with nature. This constant exposure to alternative lives creates what psychologists call FOMO, the fear of missing out, but it's actually something much deeper and more destructive. The inability to fully commit to any choice, because there is always the possibility that another choice would have been better. This generates constant existential anxiety, where people live their own lives as if they were critical spectators, always wondering if they should be doing something different. I want to pause for a moment to ask, do you also feel this deep disconnection in your daily life? This feeling that despite being more connected than ever through technology, something essential has been lost along the way? I know it can be hard to put into words. Many of us carry this weight in silence, believing we're the only ones to feel this particular emptiness. But you're not alone in this. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this disconnection when," and filling in with your personal experience. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to feel they're not alone in their struggle. Sometimes naming what we feel is the first step to transforming it. The situation worsens when we realize that the very structure of the modern economy depends on this constant dissatisfaction. Consumer capitalism works precisely by keeping people in a perpetual state of unsatisfied desire. If people actually found lasting satisfaction with what they have, the entire system would collapse. Therefore, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us that our current life isn't enough, that we need more, different, new. This applies to products, but also to experiences, relationships, careers, and even identities. The very notion of personal development has been co-opted by this logic of never enough, transforming the search for improvement into an infinite race where the finish line is always moving further away. People today feel they must be constantly optimizing, developing, reinventing themselves as if their current version were always inadequate. This is one of the most perverse aspects of our society's inner death. We transformed the very search for meaning into another source of anxiety and inadequacy. Simultaneously, the fragmentation of religious and cultural traditions left a spiritual vacuum that's being filled by inadequate substitutes. For centuries, organized religions, despite all their limitations and problems, provided meaning structures that connected individual life to greater purposes. They offered rituals that marked life transitions, communities that provided emotional support, and narratives that placed individual suffering within broader contexts of meaning. With the decline of these traditions, people today are forced to build their own meaning systems from scratch, a task for which few are prepared. Modern substitutes like consumerism, hedonism, or even certain forms of activism simply don't have the depth and permanence necessary to sustain the existential weight that a full human life requires. It's like trying to build a cathedral with toothpicks. It might look impressive from a distance, but it crumbles at the slightest wind. The digital revolution also fundamentally transformed our relationship with attention and concentration, creating what we can call perpetual distraction society. Our devices were deliberately designed to capture and fragment our attention using techniques based on decades of behavioral psychology research. The result is that we progressively lose our ability to maintain prolonged focus on any activity, including the activities most important for psychological well-being: deep reflection, meaningful conversations, silent contemplation, and what philosophers call being present. Without the ability to maintain focused attention, it becomes practically impossible to develop deep relationships, master complex skills, or engage in any form of creative or intellectual work that generates lasting satisfaction. We get stuck in a constant state of superficial stimulation that never quite satisfies. Like someone who can only eat candy when what the body really needs is a nutritious meal. This fragmentation of attention not only reduces our productivity or learning capacity, it cuts our connection to those deep experiences that make life worthwhile. Another crucial aspect of this inner death is the transformation of human relationships into functional and transitory connections. In traditional communities, relationships were deep and lasting by necessity. People depended on each other for survival, and this interdependence created bonds that went far beyond personal preference or convenience. Today, in most modern urban contexts, relationships have become optional and conditional. We relate to people as long as they suit us, make us feel good, or meet our specific needs. When that stops happening, we simply drift away and find other people. This disposable relationship mentality applies not just to friendships and romantic relationships, but also to family, professional, and community bonds. The result is that people live in a state of constant superficial connection, but rarely experience that sense of deep and unconditional belonging that is fundamental to psychological well-being. It's the difference between knowing many people and being truly known by someone, between being popular and being loved, between being always connected and never being alone. The issue becomes even more complex when we consider how the very structure of modern work contributes to this inner alienation. Most people today work in jobs that are so specialized and fragmented that it's almost impossible to see the connection between their daily work and any meaningful outcome in the real world. A programmer writes code that will be integrated into a system he'll never see functioning. An HR employee processes forms that affect people he'll never meet. A financial analyst manipulates numbers representing abstract economic realities he'll never physically touch. This separation between work and tangible outcome creates what sociologists call work alienation, where people spend most of their waking hours engaged in activities they don't feel as meaningful or connected to their essential humanity. Combined with economic pressure that forces people to remain in unsatisfying jobs for financial security, this creates a form of psychological prison where people feel simultaneously privileged to have work and deeply dissatisfied with how they spend their days. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of this crisis is how it became self-perpetuating through what we can call mandatory happiness culture. In a society that promises everyone can be happy and fulfilled if they make the right choices, those who feel empty or dissatisfied begin to believe there's something personally wrong with them. This creates an additional layer of suffering, not just the original emptiness, but also shame and self-blame for feeling that emptiness. People begin to hide their existential dissatisfaction behind masks of forced optimism, creating a cycle where everyone pretends to be fine while suffering in silence, reinforcing the illusion that everyone else has found the satisfaction that eludes us. This everything is great culture prevents us from developing the languages and social rituals necessary to collectively process our existential challenges. In traditional societies, there were recognized spaces for melancholy, contemplation, and even despair. There were mourning rituals, times of silence, traditions of retreat and reflection. Today, we're constantly pressured to be well and productive, as if our deep humanity were an inconvenience to social functioning. But before we despair completely, it's crucial to understand that this crisis also contains within itself the seeds of its own solution. The first transformative revelation is recognizing that this emptiness we feel isn't a personal failure, but a natural and even healthy response to artificial social conditions. Our existential discomfort is evidence that our deepest nature is resisting a way of life that, despite being materially comfortable, is psychologically unsustainable. It's like fever that indicates the body is fighting an infection. The emptiness we feel is our inner wisdom alerting us that something needs to change. The first step to healing this inner death is to stop treating it as a problem to be solved through more choices, more optimizations, or more distractions, and start seeing it as a call to a fundamentally different way of living and relating. The cure begins with what we can call the depth revolution. Instead of seeking more experiences, we need to seek deeper experiences. Instead of seeking more relationships, we need to seek deeper relationships. Instead of seeking more options, we need to learn to choose fewer options and commit more fully to those we choose. This means intentionally developing our capacity for sustained attention, our tolerance for boredom, our ability to be present without distraction. It means deliberately choosing to limit our access to certain technologies and stimuli that we know fragment our attention. It means creating personal and family rituals that mark important moments in life and connect us to larger cycles of meaning. It means actively seeking experiences of transcendence, whether through nature, art, spirituality, or service to others, experiences that connect us to something greater than our individual desires and concerns. Equally important is what we can call the interdependence revolution. We need to consciously rebuild bonds of mutual interdependence that create meaning through the genuine need we have for each other. This might mean participating in intentional communities, collaborative projects, or forms of activism that connect us to greater purposes. It might mean deliberately choosing to live in ways that require cooperation and long-term commitment. It might mean learning practical skills that make us useful to others in tangible ways, or dedicating regular time to caring for people who really need our presence and attention. The key is to move out of relationship mode based on preference and convenience and into forms of connection based on mutual responsibility and lasting commitment. When we become genuinely necessary for others' well-being, and when we allow others to become genuinely necessary for our well-being, we rediscover a sense of purpose and belonging that no amount of individual freedom can provide. The transformation also requires that we develop what we can call wisdom of enough. In a culture that constantly tells us we need more, the ability to recognize and savor what we already have becomes a revolutionary act. This doesn't mean passively accepting unjust conditions or stopping the search for growth and improvement. It means developing the ability to distinguish between desires that arise from authentic needs and desires that are artificially created by constant cultural bombardment. It means learning to find lasting satisfaction in simple experiences. A deep conversation, a carefully prepared meal, a silent walk, the slow growth of a skill or relationship over time. It means recognizing that human happiness isn't a state achieved through accumulating positive experiences, but a quality of presence we can cultivate regardless of our external circumstances. Perhaps even more radical is the need to completely redefine our understanding of success and progress. The current model, based on infinite growth, constant optimization, and accumulation of symbolic capital, is fundamentally incompatible with human psychological health. We need to develop well-being